Hello, everyone. We apologize. We are not going to be posting a podcast this week. It's been a busy week, but not necessarily busier than normal. It's frankly been pretty productive. We've gotten a magazine done and to reviewers, the Living Church News and other things. But as Mr. Robinson and I were recording the podcast this week, actually earlier this morning, we thought we'd done a really good job. It was about 42 minutes in, and we really had to break before our conclusion because we had another appointment with Mr. DeSimone. Had a great meeting with him concerning statistics about subscribers and the magazines and renewals, and frankly, it was a very good meeting. It was actually very exciting. But the whole time, and Mr. Robinson and I felt the same way, even though we didn't talk about it during the meeting. That would have been rude during a meeting, talking about something else. But we did have... we tend to call them subroutines. You got a massive program, but then you have a subroutine running behind the scenes. We both kind of had a subroutine running in our brain as we were thinking about the podcast we had just recorded, and both of us felt the same way. We felt there were aspects to the topics that if we had our druthers, we would actually start the podcast over and ensure that we included those. And so by the time the meeting was actually pretty long, by the time we got here back to the building, it's kind of too late to be able to go back and do that again. In fact, even now, as I'm looking at the clock, I'm hoping I'm not getting locked in the building because it's after work hours and people starting to leave. So hopefully I'll leave in time. But I told Mr. Robinson I would at least make this video out there for those, since most of you interact with the podcast through YouTube, but not everybody does. We'd at least put this apology video out there. And also, he wanted to make sure that I took note of the fact that many of you have sent in emails that we have not responded to you in terms of letting you know that we've gotten that email. We try to do that, but it seemed like there was a real bevy of them recently. I don't know how many people still say the word bevy, but it means a lot. There were actually quite a little burst of emails, and we appreciate those. Some of you suggesting topics, offering encouragement, and how much you appreciate the podcast. So thank you very much. In fact, I got my email open here and I see there's one there and there and there and there. And I think that's also one. And there's one and there's one. And anyway, there's several right here in front of me. And let me just apologize that we haven't at least acknowledged your email. Thank you very much for it. We do appreciate it. And we'll do our best to try to get to those and send you a response to let you know that we appreciate it. But until that time, I hope you'll take this video as appreciation. We really do appreciate every comment that comes in terms of the encouragement that you're benefiting from these podcasts, and some of you listening to them with your families, which is fantastic. We really enjoy hearing that. So thank you very much. And I told Mr. Robinson that I would mention that, and so here I am mentioning it. So there you go. The last thing I'll mention, and we'll use this as an opportunity to request some feedback, not about the podcast specifically, but the LivingYouthorg page in general. I imagine because I don't, based on our setup right now, it's really very simple. We have a very simple website without much to it other than the content. And so as a result, I don't even know necessarily the statistics, but I suspect that a lot of you are listening to the podcast, but maybe haven't gone to check out the website itself at LivingYouthorg. And actually, our posting of content has been a little up and down. Sometimes it's just the podcast, then other times we try to add a lot more material. But the reason I'm mentioning is because we'd really like some feedback. If you have been out there, please give us feedback. If you haven't been out there to LivingYouth.org, please do go out and give us some feedback. What kind of content would you like to see? We've got, of course, the podcasts are out there, but we've also got links to other things. We have links to some videos that we didn't even produce ourselves, but we thought that you would find helpful. If we notice something in a sermon or we notice something in an article, we try to make, that is in terms of things that we publish, we try to put those out there. For a while there, we had some original content being written, and we actually do have, and we mentioned in the podcast on crushes, that we have some written content that we have not put out yet, but we plan on putting some written content out as well. But the teens and young adults who are listening, if you wouldn't mind giving us some feedback and letting us know what kind of content out there would be helpful for you, we would appreciate that. You can just use the podcast, even though this is not just about the podcast, you could just use the podcast email address. That's podcast@livingyouth.org, or I guess from your, would it be podcast@livingyouth.org? whatever direction you read in, which should be left to right, podcast@LivingYouthorg. Just send us your thoughts if you don't mind. Letting us know if what we're putting out there is already super duper helpful. That's great. Feel free and not send us anything then. But if there's some kind of content that you find would be particularly helpful, we would certainly like to know. And that really is it. I know a lot of you watch these on Fridays, so I'll go ahead and say have a happy Sabbath. If you happen to be watching this on a different day, well then, I hope you had a happy Sabbath, I suppose. But regardless, we appreciate your encouragement. We apologize that we don't have a podcast up for this particular weekend, but we do look forward to getting to it again next week. So thank you very much for all your support. Take care, and I hope you have a happy Sabbath.